Welcome to Trainz! Paging Mr. Cooper, paging Mr. DB Cooper, your flight is here. We've got an Inflight 200, Boeing 727-200. It is the IF722035, and the Trainz SKU is P as in Papa, 12811979. Yeah, I said niner because I'm being a dork. Price time of filming is $189.99. And if you're wondering why I'm rattling on about Mr. Cooper, this is in the Northwest Orient Airlines paint scheme, and it is almost identical to the aircraft that was hijacked. For you train folks out here, this might sound a little familiar to what Electromotive did back in the day, right? Now, Boeing came out with the 707. That was the first, commercial jetliner that they came out with. And you could get your 707 pretty much any way you wanted it. They were happy to make a million different variations to please all the different customers. But Boeing management realized, well, doing that made it extremely difficult and expensive to tool up and mass produce. So when it came time to design the next jetliner, they decided that they were only going to do two versions of it, right? So kind of like EMD was like, you can get your F series, you can paint it any way you want it, but the engine options are pretty much going to be basic. Kind of the same deal here. You can get your 727 either as the -100, which was a little bit shorter, or you can get the 727-200, which had an extension to the fuselage and more passenger space. And by keeping it at just those two primary options, it made production a lot easier. And I think they made over 1,800 in total. Otherwise, the 727-100, -200, -200 Advanced, the, the QC, the quick change, to change it from a passenger plane to a freighter. But the fuselage length, the engines, the wing, everything else, that stayed the same throughout. So much more efficient way to go about things. When it came time to design the new jet, Boeing was shopping around asking different airline customers, what was it they were looking for? United Airlines had a very high altitude airport that they served, and so they wanted lots of power, right? You'll frequently see mentions of hot and high conditions, right? So lots of power. Now, American wanted better efficiency. Right? So the Boeing 707 had 4 engines and it had 3 crew positions. They're like, we want to save fuel. And then Eastern Airlines, they wanted to serve airports in the Caribbean, which meant that they needed more than 2 engines. They didn't care how many more, but they needed more than 2 for legal reasons. Right? The FAA only allows you to fly a certain length of time over ocean with 2 engines. So Boeing took all that information, shook it up, and came out with this tri-jet, a 3-engine jet, the only tri-jet that they ever made. You'll be able to find far more details on other videos here on YouTube, but just for the fun of it, a quick little recap. Now, Dan Cooper, which the media mistakenly called him DB Cooper, he happened to be on a Northwest Airlines 727. It was a -100, not the -200 here, but close enough. And he was flying from Portland to Tacoma. And while he was flying, he was in the very back row. And he gave a note to one of the flight attendants. And initially she thought he was just trying to, give her his number. So she stuffed it in her purse. And he, "Miss, please read that note." And that's when she read that he had a bomb. And he was holding the aircraft hostage, and he wanted money. Now, as the situation developed, they eventually landed the plane. They negotiated an exchange of the hostages. He kept the flight crew on the aircraft. He got $200,000 and 4 parachutes, 2 back chutes, 2 front chutes. And they took off again. And as they were flying, he told them to fly toward Mexico. But then he got very specific. He said, "I want you to fly at 100 knots. I want you to set the flap angle to 15 degrees. I want you to keep the cabin depressurized, and I want you to keep the landing gear down, right? Very specific way that he wanted the aircraft flown. And as they're flying along, at a certain point in time, the air stair in the back comes down and he's gone, right? Now, he was never found, and of the $200,000 that he took, the majority of it was never found. They did find about $5,800, a couple bricks of cash, rubber banded, that had washed up on a creek bed years later, I think in 1980. But the man himself and the majority of the money was never found, never used. Now, talking about an air stair on the back of the aircraft here on the Boeing 727, they had a retractable staircase. The idea was that a 727 would operate at a lot of these airports that had minimal infrastructure, right? So instead of having to cart out stairs or coming up to a jetway, right? That's what it's called? I think that's what it's called. They would just put the stairs down. After the hijacking, and there were a couple copycats as well, Boeing redesigned the air stairs, right? They included something called the Cooper Vane. And it's basically like a little paddle. And as you are flying, the paddle kind of goes sideways and it acts as an aerodynamic wedge, and it keeps the air stair locked from the outside so it can't be deployed in flight. When you land, without the air pressure flying, it springs back and you can up and down with the air stair, no problem. Visually speaking, this is a really nice airplane, right? I like the contrast of the white on top, the red tail, the silver wings and silver belly. Visually, it's really appealing. And for those of you who are curious, this nose profile here, Boeing used it on the 707, the 727, and the 737. So even today in the Boeing 737 MAX 8, right? That's their latest generation. They still have the nose profile and shape of their original jet airliner, which I think it's a fun detail. The center duct here, during takeoff on the prototype, they lost airflow, and so the center engine surged and knocked out. They fixed that by adding vortex generators inside the ducting, and ever since then, it worked really well. So I think this is a pretty cool aircraft. It's got a really neat history. It looks nice. I wouldn't say it's exactly swooshable. This is $189.99. So it's not like you're going to go, dog fighting with your kid, but I don't know, maybe you could. That's all for today. Please like and subscribe if you'd be so kind. And until next time, try not to do something so monumental that they name a piece of aircraft equipment after you.
Trainz.com. Making dreams come true, one train at a time.